Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alex Fry. I'm an account manager here at Efficiency Vermont. I'm joined by my colleagues Steve Casey and Lauren Wentz, who will be going over Efficiency Vermont's new electric panel incentive and kind of give you guys a quick overview of that program. If you have any questions while Lauren's presenting, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll make sure to get to you. And with that, I'll give it to you, Lauren.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you. Alex, do we have a bit of a critical mass?
We have about 6 attendees, so I'd say so.
Right, great, fabulous. All right, so as Alex said, great to be with you all this morning. I'm excited to be gathering to give you all an update on a new program that we are launching that we have available in the market. And give you a bit of more information about the larger context for kind of where this program came from, because there's also more opportunity coming down the pike to make you guys aware of in the imminent future. All right, so quick lay of the land for the agenda for this morning. I'll give a bit of an overview of kind of that funding snapshot and how this program came about and what does it mean for you all. What are the program requirements for customers to access these funds to cover electric panel upgrades, what their process is, and then of course leave time at the end for any questions and answers. But as Alex said, as I'm talking, if folks come up for you, or sorry, if questions come up for you or thoughts or feedback as I go, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and then at the end we'll circle back. All right, so starting with kind of a bit of an overview. So essentially, kind of the 30,000 foot level, so to speak, is that Efficiency Vermont recently in the last number of months received a new source of funding from the Department of Public Service to provide support for customers, residential customers, to receive incentives in order to support electric panel upgrades in their homes. The program is specifically designated for customers who are low and moderate income, and we'll get to that part later in terms of process and whatnot. There are, as a result of kind of the nature of the funding, a handful of, or not a short list necessarily, of requirements of how the funds are to be used in service of supporting electric panel upgrades. And so many of those program and product level requirements that I'll talk about today are kind of simply communicating out to you all as we are to customers and others, kind of what those requirements are in order to be able to actually apply the funding and so that customers can maximize their benefit. Quick heads up, I'll touch on this later in terms of process for customers and the rebate form, but approved projects, the incentives for those can be paid either directly to customers. Let's say if they've paid out of pocket and you are awaiting payment, let's say as the electrician of record for the project, or if the customer or you fill out the section of on the rebate form that the rebate check can go directly to you, that is also a possibility. So turnaround time is certainly a factor for that. So we can talk through what that would look like timeline-wise, but want to make sure to convey that the ability in this program is that customers can pay directly or contractor or subcontractor. Touching on quickly phase program development. So right now today we're talking about essentially just phase one of a much larger kind of program deployment or opportunity that Efficiency Vermont has to make this program, the electric panel upgrades, available statewide to all income qualifying customers. Again, income qualifying for this is low and moderate income. So phase one is just applicable to flood affected homeowners, and next up, but not yet available, is flood affected rental property owners for their rental properties. So I want to emphasize that today, all of what I'm speaking about is specific to flood affected homeowners, and flood affected are those is flood as defined in our other flood rebate offers that we've had going on for the last number of months. So between those dates in July and then through August for folks in Addison County. The exact dates for which all of that is printed on the rebate form if folks need clarification. All right, so getting a bit more into the program requirements. So again, as I mentioned, right now we're talking about phase one. So eligible customers are those flood affected homeowners in those areas and between those dates, those date parameters. And that the customer must be low or moderate income, also known as 120% below 100%, 20% area median income or AMI. On the rebate form itself, the customer is responsible for checking off a checkbox in an income qualification chart that self-attests to their income qualification at or below that specific income level. So the income verification piece is by no means the electrician's responsibility as part of this process. So we want to make sure that you all know that the income eligibility piece is a responsibility on the customer in terms of their part of filling out the form to ensure that their project is eligible. So speaking of project eligibility requirements, these are kind of the four main things, give or take, I'm going to kind of touch on and dive into a little bit further. And again, this is kind of details and requirements straight out of the guidance kind of grant and that we received to deploy this funding, and therefore we have to pass through in kind of how the program functions itself. So for starters, or I'll go kind of further into things, but there are three main reasons for electric panel upgrades. The system must be upgraded to 200 amps, or if advised by the electrician who's performing the work, it can go up to 225. The scope must adhere to the allowable or and exclude and not include any unallowable project components. I'll go into what those are. And also, there are itemized project scope bucket maximums. So maximum amounts of the total project cost that some individual components must take up. And I'll go into that further. But touching on quickly the three main reasons for electric panel upgrades. So there essentially any single project is going to fall into one, possibly more than one, but at least one of these categories. Number one, the customer is installing new equipment in their home, new electrification measures, be it a new heat pump hot water heater, replacing some piece of equipment, or let's say is installing an EV charger. And in order to accommodate those things, the panel needs to be upgraded. So that's one eligible kind of reason or cause for the electrical upgrade. The second one is that those things already currently exist at home, but to address health and safety measures and to accommodate all that's already currently there more effectively and appropriately, the system can be upgraded. And the third kind of eligible reason for the upgrade is that customer wants to future-proof. So they anticipate sometime in the future wanting to electrify further in their home. And they want to do the electric panel work now in anticipation of that effort. Notice that the three reasons that I just mentioned, none of that touches on flood whatsoever. So some of the rebates that Efficiency Vermont has been offering to flood-affected customers are those that, not exclusively, but some items must have been damaged by the flood itself in order for the customer to seek a rebate from Efficiency Vermont to support the replacement of that thing, right? These panel funds are different. The panel funds can allow a customer, or do allow a customer, whose home itself was affected by the floods during that time period. Their electrical system in and of itself does not necessarily need to have been impacted or what have you by the flood in order for the customer to seek these funds to upgrade their panel based on the requirements. So I want to draw that distinction. I, let's say, could have lived in somewhere in Addison County. My home could have flooded during the time parameters allowed. But let's say I only kind of quote unquote only received about 2 inches of water in the first floor of my home, and the baseboards and drywall need to be replaced, but my electrical system was fine. I could still, as a flood affected homeowner, apply for these funds in order to upgrade the electrical panel and service in my home. All right. So I want to get into kind of more about what these allowable and unallowable equipment under program are, and kind of nature of the scope. So certainly you are all the experts, and we know that this is somewhat preaching to the choir, or all stuff that feels potentially, I hope, fairly kind of in bounds of what a typical electric panel or service entrance upgrade requires. Again, this is kind of straight out of the provisions of the requirements for how the funding is used that we're kind of needing to pass through. But essentially, a service entrance upgrade is allowable. A new electric panel or sub panel is needed. Wiring to serve the new load, meter socket and related materials, work on customer-owned poles or conduit, and that may include work that's around trenching and backfilling. Service line work from the transformer to the home or meter socket, costs associated with disposing of or recycling the old stuff that's being replaced, and then other critical safety corrections if advised by the electrician, by you all, if you're the one doing the work. So the key thing about this last one is that the critical safety corrections need to stem out of a result of the electric panel upgrade. So kind of the project of record, so to speak, needs to initiate with the electric panel upgrade or service entrance upgrade as required. And if in the course of performing that or carrying that out, critical safety corrections are identified, those are allowable as a result of kind of stemming from the panel work itself. All right, and then we get into the unallowed equipment, and hopefully the fact that this list is a lot shorter is helpful, but kind of the quick and dirty of it. So essentially, these funds cannot go towards covering costs associated with touching the transformer, providing the customer with end-use equipment. That includes, for example, EV chargers or a home generator, and then materials for cosmetic improvements. So we know, for example, let's say if a customer, in order to install a new sub panel, let's say part of the dry wall needs to be extended or repaired in order to accommodate the new sub panel, that kind of scenario would not be considered cosmetic improvement. So we know that this might have a little bit of up to interpretation, but hopefully kind of the long form example or call out for what's possible in here or what's not possible or how it's intended to be interpreted is helpful to you all. All right, and then we get to the project scope bucket maximum. So this is also kind of straight out of the overarching funding requirements that we received that we were required to kind of pass through to folks who are performing the work under this program. So related to wiring, for any costs and materials, the costs for materials and parts related to and specific to wiring to include junction boxes and receptacles or outlets may not exceed $2,000 as part of the overall project cost. And then costs related to materials and parts specific to work on customer-owned poles or conduit, including trenching and backfilling, can't exceed more than $5,000. So that means that if a customer, that kind of subtotal for wiring came to $1,800, I'm kind of just making up examples, we would, if all other kind of requirements for the program are true, we would be able to provide kind of reimburse you or the customer directly for the full cost of that $1,800 kind of subtotal for wiring. If, let's say, there was a lot of wiring that was required, things had to be moved from the basement above grade, and that really hiked the price of the subtotal for wiring and the cost of materials related to it, or the materials and parts related to it. And let's say the subtotal for wiring came to instead $3,000. Again, just making up an example here for the sake of it. We would only be able to provide funding to cover $2,000 out of that $3,000. And so what that means is that if the project scope requires more than these kind of bucket maximums, two things to do. One, check in with Efficiency Vermont on kind of the total project cost. And then the second thing is discussing with the customer and reinforcing with the customer, certainly what these maximums are spelled out on the rebate form, but nonetheless, that the customer may need to essentially float the difference. Okay. So again, there are these 2 bucket maximums, one for wiring related to wiring, and one for customer-owned poles or conduit and trenching and backfilling work. Here is a quick snapshot of the project invoice summary, and this is off of the rebate form that I'll dive into when we kind of get to customer process. But this is what, in part, we would ask the electrician who is performing the work to fill out on the rebate form to help us see what those subtotal costs are. And then how those all kind of add up in total to the total project cost. The maximum project cost available for low-income customers is $10,000, and the maximum rebate available on that project is up to 100%. For moderate income customers, it's up to 90%, so the equivalent of up to $9,000 in eligible project cost back. All right, so moving on to customer process. We know that this part impacts you all as electricians if you are the one, let's say, performing the work for a customer under this program. So I want to get into kind of the nitty gritty and talk through it and how you may help answer questions for a customer, but also your role in the process. All right, so quick thing, we have a new rebate form available on our website. This is on the right-hand side, an actual snapshot of what the form looks like, or at least part of it. This is a direct hyperlink under where to find that would get you right to the form itself. If you're navigating through Efficiency Vermont's website from scratch, when you go to the homepage, you'll click on rebates in the top header, and then you'll scroll down to where it says flood rebates, and then you'll select the flood rebates available to homeowners. And then you'll be able to see the direct link for the form there. So where to find it, there's the hyperlink. I'm imagining that slides will be sent around afterwards, and we're happy to, maybe as a part of that, just attach the rebate form if that's helpful too, in a PDF form. When to submit. So essentially, the rebate form needs to be submitted after the project is completed. So it can't be completed in anticipation of the project, the panel work being done. Projects must be completed between these date parameters. So as of September 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2026. And that kind of far out date, almost 3 years from now, is because that is when the funding we have to deploy this program and additional uses of this funds, it essentially kind of goes to the end of 2026. So therefore, the rebate form for completed projects can be submitted up until that very, very kind of drop dead date of December 31st, 2026. So we know that projects that might complete, let's say by the end of September 2026, customers getting their ducks in a row and then having a little bit of a buffer for submitting their rebate form for that completed project. And then what to submit. So this completed rebate form needs to be completed and signed by both the customer and the electrician. And also we need whoever's submitting the form, be it you or the customer, if you're the electrician who's performed the work and signed off on the form, to also attach your itemized invoice. And this can be the typical invoice that you print off and send to any customer who you've done similar work with. All right. So I want to break down the rebate form just a little bit because it's not the longest form Efficiency Vermont has ever come up with, but it's not the shortest. So the simplest way of breaking it down is kind of into these 3 sections, if you will. Page 1 is meant to be a resource. It's meant to be a go-to resource about the project and rebate eligibility and how to apply for it. So it's meant for the customer to review, but also for the electrician performing the work to review. Pages 2, 3, and a little bit of page 4 is for the customer to complete. This includes a page dedicated to what's called a flood attestation. And we are required because to include this because the source of these funds is actually they're federal funds. And therefore, we're required to have the customer sign off to attest to the fact that their house was or home or residence was flood damaged. There's questions about FEMA and whatnot. So the customer needs to fill out pages 2, 3, and sign page 4. And then page 5 and 6 are for the electrician who's performing the work to complete. It includes such information as contact information, project scope details, that invoice summary, and room for your signature at the top of page 6. And also, as a heads up, just to reinforce, we do need and ask electricians to attach that itemized invoice. I want to quickly go back a few slides, forgive me for doing so, to this slide. So as a heads up, what is acceptable or workable is that if, let's say you're the electrician who is filling out this rebate form alongside the customer, you're the one who performed the work, you could write across this table, "See attached," so long as your invoice provides in this way these itemized subtotals that can be clearly read. It can be a cover sheet to your typical itemized invoice, that's fine. But if filling out this kind of specific box on the rebate form feels like a bridge too far, we get it. What is allowable is for you to write across this table, "See attached," again, so long as what you're attaching clearly lays out these subtotal costs in these ways. Okay. All right. So I'm going to kind of quickly go back here. And now we get to question and answer. So I've been talking for a little bit. I know this is a bit of a whole bunch of information. Hopefully not too confusing too early in the morning before you all get out perhaps into the field. But wanted to lay out kind of what the program is, how customers can access it, the role for electricians in the process, and also kind of touch on what comes next. And kind of maybe that's a great way to tee off the Q&A. I do see there are maybe potentially 2 questions or comments in the chat we can get to. But wanted to just let folks know that this kind of phase 1 is kind of just that. So there is a substantial kind of the overall funding picture for this work will cover much more than just phase 1, right? And much more than just flood customers. The plan for subsequent phases of the program is to not just work with our other utility partners such as, like, for example, BD, VGS, GMP, but also to open the program up statewide to customers. Will all customers at those future phases use the rebate form? Probably not. Will it be important for you all to be aware that EVT has this funding in the future when we come back and kind of loop back with further announcements and kind of debriefs and webinars on how customers at that point in time can access the funding? Absolutely. We want to make sure that you all feel well informed about what's out there, what kind of questions customers might be coming to you with. But we also want to hear your feedback. What's great about connecting, or one of the things I hope is great about connecting with you all at this stage during phase 1, is to get your feedback about the process. And as we prepare and kind of do our due diligence in-house to begin to develop what that kind of bigger statewide approach looks like, getting feedback from you about approach and process is definitely a key part of the process. So happy to answer any questions and also any discussion on feedback.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, as Lauren said, you can raise your hand and we can take you off mute if you have any discussion or questions you want to bring up. You can also type in chat as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren, for going over that. I would, just for folks on the call, highly recommend. We know this is a new process. It's quite a bit of work. There's a lot of detail that goes into this. So you all are assigned an Efficiency Vermont account manager. And so I would highly recommend, bringing us in before the project so that we can help walk you through those first couple projects that you do, just to keep you on track and try to make this as painless as possible. So if you don't know who your Efficiency Vermont account manager is, please reach out and we will let you know so that you can follow up with that person directly.
Looks like we're getting a couple questions. Yep. Yeah, there will be a recording, Mark. I don't know how soon, but this is being recorded.
Yeah. And then Bill asks, is this program only for Addison County? No. it is for anyone who was affected by the flood.
And just to kind of quickly clarify, the floods that occurred that were disaster declared back in the summer. So unfortunately, at this present time, the floods that folks experienced in December, those are not applicable, right?
Yep.
Or for Efficiency Vermont's other flood rebates.
Daniel has a question about what about customers who have already completed the work?
Great question.
Yep.
So long as they were flood affected, so long as the work was completed on or after September 1st, and that all other kind of project eligibility items are true, yes, it can be retroactive back to September 1st.
Bill raised his hand.
For example, oh, sorry, Alex, one second. We know, for example, that some customers who were flood impacted had to do this kind of work very early on, even just to get their existing system back online, right? Not necessarily electrical system, but new appliance, critical appliances, hot water, what have you, in order to replace those quickly. So we get that some of this work for sure needed to be completed already. We're trying to capture as many of those folks as possible. So if you have worked with a customer who kind of falls into that category, and there you have questions about the eligibility of their project, as Steve said, feel free to reach out.
Bill has another question. I'm going to take him off mute. All right, you can speak, Bill. You just got to unmute yourself.
Thank you for the help on that one. Good morning. Great. I love your teaching style. I really understood you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Phew.
Can you remind me of the maximum amount of the combining the categories of the two different materials and the labor?
Yes. Bill, are you also on the computer so that you can see my screen?
Nope.
All right. Bill, if you're viewing the computer at the same time, I've landed on the screen that speaks to your question, but I'll talk through it just in case you're only joining by phone. So these are the other two project cost maximums: wiring up to $2,000 and customer-owned pole and conduit, trenching and backfilling maximum of $5,000. So I'm going to quickly jump ahead to this project invoice summary. We obviously know that even in a project where the maximum for wiring is reached and the maximum for customer-owned pole and conduit, including trenching and backfilling, may be reached. So basically, if the project maximizes what's allowable for A and B here, we know that there are other costs involved. For example, all-in labor, right? And then also everything else that was required. For example, parts and materials that had nothing to do with wiring and trenching and pole work. Okay, so with the maximum project total of up to $10,000, we know that some projects are going to really butt right up against that edge. So just want to make sure you know that we know that there are other costs associated with the project outside of that wiring maximum and that essentially I'll call it pole trenching and backfilling maximum. And we need and ask that the invoice summary and your attached itemized invoice lay that all out.
Thank you. I just needed to be reminded of the
Great.
max.
Okay, perfect.
I have a perfect example here in Hardwick.
Yeah.
We have a flooded basement with a flooded oil furnace and a gas water heater.
Mm-hmm.
So the panel was not hit, but it is inadequate for the homeowner who wants a central heat pump and a heat pump water heater.
Yep.
So we're going to put the pedal to the metal now that we have this.
Great, Bill. That's a fantastic example of exactly what this new funding opportunity for this customer segment first in phase one is meant to accomplish. So not only get back online heating and hot water for this customer, but take that opportunity to electrify. What we don't want, and what this essentially the Department of Public Service is trying to do, is to say we don't want electric panel work to be the barrier, right? And we don't want the cost of that, because we know it can be sizable. You all know best for sure, to be a barrier and prevent that work from occurring at all. So that sounds like a perfect example on paper.
Well, the impediment was that the new panel needs to be on the first floor, not the
Yep.
basement. So,
Yep.
I think this will cover it, and she
Great.
definitely qualifies.
Great.
This young woman, has lived all winter with no central heat because she wants to do the right thing.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Alex, what other questions might be hanging out that haven't been answered yet, if any?
Don't believe I'm seeing any. I'd say we give it another minute or so, see if anything rolls in. Otherwise, I'd just like to reiterate what Steve said. Every one of you guys have an account manager at Efficiency Vermont. You can feel free to reach out to us if you have any question. I'm an account manager. If you don't know who your account manager is, you can reach out to me or give customer service a call, and they'll put you in touch with your account manager. And also, at the end of this call, there may be a small chance you get a survey. It'll take 1 to 2 minutes. If you don't mind, please filling it out. We greatly appreciate your feedback.
Great. Want to just piggyback, Alex, thanks so much for that. Happy to also be a resource for folks. Again, as kind of Steve mentioned, we know that there's a lot of detail involved in customers accessing this support. And we appreciate your support in kind of helping customers submit the information they need to really get the most out of this. We know that project costs for electric panel work and service entrance work, when it's necessary and needed, can get costly. We also know that sometimes it can be a quick fix. So we hope that if you all have any questions about what qualifies and whatnot, reach out with any questions, and hopefully the process is clear to you all, but we're here to help along the way.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. I don't see any other questions, and it's been about a minute or so, so I think it's right good to wrap up. Just want to thank everyone for coming out again today. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.